first teaching experiences was when I was a student teacher for Dublin City Schools. I started at Deer Run Elementary School, and I was there for about 7 weeks. I assumed responsibility for grades 1 through 5, and I also helped plan the elementary art show. My second experience as an art teacher was at Dublin Kaufman High School. There, I was teaching art foundations, ceramics, and sculpture with a mixture of all grades from 9 through 12. Dublin is a very unique place where the city is populated with all different types of people from all different types of backgrounds. As you can see on this chart, students from all different backgrounds go to these schools with still having a very high white population. My next schooling experience was teaching as a long-term art sub for Mentor Public Schools. I was teaching for Ridge Middle School, which is actually no longer a middle school, but there I taught grades 6th through 8th, and I was teaching fine art and general art courses. I also helped the art show for that school as well, but what was very unique about my time here was that I went to Ridge when it was Ridge Junior High School, and still some of the same teachers were there, so it was really great to not only have them as a student, but then also get to work with them as an adult and sharing the same profession. And as you can see, Mentor is a little bit more populated with white. It still has a mixture of different demographics here. So after my experience back in Mentor, which is also where I grew up and where I lived, I moved back down to the Columbus area, to Dublin, and I was teaching at Dublin Scioto High School. They have 3 high schools there, so at this point I was teaching at 2 of them. And I was a leave replacement because the teacher retired that December, and I started teaching in January at the high school. There I was teaching grades 9 through 12, and I was teaching graphic design, sculpture, and computer graphics. Once again, it is a highly populated white city. There is still some percents of Asian and Hispanic, Black, 2 or more races. When I would say 2 or more races, there's lots of Somalian population down in that area, and it's even growing. I had students in my class that were Mediterranean. They were from Egypt. It's just a very awesome and diverse community that I was so happy to be a part of. After my second time teaching for Dublin City Schools, I moved back home to Mentor, and I started teaching at Kenston Local Schools, which is located in Chagrin Falls. Here I started out as a full leave art teacher replacement. They hired me at the middle school, and I was teaching 6th grade general art. That was a whole crazy year for them because the middle school collapsed and the roof caved in, and they had to separate all the students. So the 6th grade was in a different building, 7th grade was in a different building, and the 8th grade was joining the high school for the remainder of that school year. When I started at the high school, I ended my time at the middle school, and I signed a contract to be a teacher for the end of the year, starting in January at the high school, because they had too many art sections and not enough teachers to teach. So there I was teaching Art 1 Survey, which consisted of all different art media. And I once again helped plan and organize the art show there for them. After looking on this chart, you can see that the demographics here are quite similar to Mentor, and that did reflect in the students in my classroom. So after I was teaching for Kenston, I once again became a long-term art sub at Mentor Schools. Oddly enough, the teacher who I shared the classroom with when I was first being a long-term sub, I was now her long-term sub because she was going on maternity leave. So there I was teaching 6th grade art foundations, and 7th and 8th grade exploratory art. This is a very unique experience for me because I was not only teaching for Memorial Middle School, but at the same time, I was teaching for St. Paul Lutheran. And at St. Paul Lutheran, I was a part-time art teacher there, but that was located in Westlake. So I was traveling from Menor to Westlake and back to Menor to teach at both schools. At St. Paul Lutheran, I was teaching preschool through 8th grade, and I was helping to develop the 8th grade visual art curriculum. So I would teach there Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Monday, Thursday, Friday, I was a long-term sub at Memorial. The classes are much smaller there, and there's only 164 kids in the whole entire school. So this is definitely a different, what I'm showing you here, it looks a lot different than what it actually is in the classroom. And coming up to this past school year, I was a long-term art sub for the high school, but the high school position was teaching 8th grade. Their 8th grade is at the high school. And on certain days, I would be going to the elementary school to be teaching kindergarten and 2nd grade art there as well. So when my time ended being a long-term art sub, I then became the building sub, which then lasted until coronavirus happened, and that was the end of my teaching career for the end of last school year, which was a very abrupt experience for myself. Here you can see this was probably the least diverse district that I have been a part of during these past 4 years of my experiences. So I have been interested in art as far back as I can remember. I began taking classes at the Cleveland Art Museum when I was 5. Throughout my school years, I took more and more fine art classes, and by the time I was a senior in high school, my course load was 90% art. I loved every second of it. I was also taking life drawing courses outside of school, as well as joining a summer pre-college program at the Cleveland Institute of Art. I felt as if art was the only thing I was good at because I put the majority of my time and effort in achieving the absolute most that I could. I would have never been exposed to these great opportunities if it wasn't for my amazing high school art teacher. She became my teacher my junior year of high school, but she taught multiple art classes that I was in. We became as close of friends that a teacher and student could respectfully become. She helped me through so much. She was there for me on the days I didn't want to be at school, but she made the art room a safe haven. She listened to me when I need an adult to talk to. My junior year, my dad got really sick and went into a coma, and he wasn't supposed to make it out of it. Luckily, he did, but those times were definitely not easy. A year after that, my grandma got really sick, and my family and I moved in to take care of her and my grandfather. She then passed away, and then 9 months later, my grandfather passed away. School was the least of my worries during this time. The support I received from her helped me more than she will ever know. I realized that I wanted to make that change. I wanted to be the teacher that allowed a safe haven for her students when they needed it. I want to be that teacher. Ohio State University was a big name in my family. No one went there for school, but they were big football fans. This university was always a name I knew. My junior year of high school was the first year I actually started thinking about college and what I wanted to do with my future. I knew I was good at art, and I really enjoyed it. Once I had many discussions with many people, including one of my biggest influencers, my high school art teacher, I decided that I wanted to study art education, one of the best decisions of my life. There are very few schools that offer the degree of art education. Many schools have you major in education and then minor in art. I wanted my BAE, my Bachelor of Art Education, so Ohio State was my number one choice. I chose a different path than most to go the route that I really wanted, but I definitely made it happen. I was not accepted into Ohio State my first year to the main campus. They offered a satellite campus in Mansfield, but I was being very stubborn and I decided that I'm just going to go to Kent State for my first year. During my first year of college, I was itching to be at Ohio State so much that I just ended up transferring at the end of the first semester to the Mansfield satellite campus. It was all worth it. Once I made my way to Columbus for the rest of my undergrad career, I was enjoying every second of my academic experience. The school, the students, the atmosphere are all so invigorating to be a part of. The feeling is absolutely not like any other. Out of a 4-year education, the first 2 years were general education courses, while the second 2 years were solely art education courses. An application process was necessary to be admitted into the program. This made it so that we had very small classes. Out of a school that has 50,000 plus students attending, my graduating class of art education majors was only 17, including myself. I saw myself as having the best of both worlds. I had the advantages of being part of a large university, and then also the advantages of being part of small classes, while having the same people in each of my classes. In my larger classes, there were students from all around the world, of all different demographics. But in my Bachelor of Art Education program were students from all over Ohio. Suburbs, rural areas, bigger cities, and I had one student in my class and she was from Ethiopia. We all got to know each other so very well. My most memorable teaching experiences had happened in multiple school districts. Each school has taught me something different, and I'm most appreciative of that. When I taught at Dublin Scioto High School, I was teaching to a population of students from all different upbringings and all different backgrounds, from all around the world. There were so many English language learner students in my classroom, and that made me a better teacher overall. Every day I was pushing myself to learn best teaching practices to better the learning outcome of my class as a whole. By mid-semester, I was connecting with my entire class, and we all became an art room family. That was one of my proudest moments as a teacher. To have a class that didn't even communicate with one another in the very beginning of the school year, and then have them become a family by the end, creating and learning together, sharing their experiences together. That was then I knew that this job was for me. Such an amazing experience. I would say that my teaching practices include gradual release of responsibility, classroom workshop, and formative reflective assessment. Art has such a special place in education in the fact that within the art classroom, many other aspects can be integrated while teaching the art objectives. In the art classroom, when teaching any grade level, using gradual release of responsibility allows students to safely learn and operate materials they have never experienced before. For example, when using a welding tool in high school, it would be very unsafe for students to experiment with that on their own. But after showing the I do, we do, you do model, the safety and confidence is boosted all around, as well as the academic performance. Using the classroom workshop structure, students are hands-on, working on the materials and creating masterpieces. This gives the students a chance to explore and develop their own ideas, which is extremely important in the art room. Nothing is worse than a classroom full of no ideas or I have no clue. That just makes for a very stale environment. So lastly, the formative reflective assessment is used constantly. Students reflecting on their own work as well as others. I have done this in groups, partners, and individually. This is a very effective practice to use halfway through the lesson so that the students can critique their artwork as well as others, and then they are able to make improvements before finishing the end product. I provide the students with a couple questions to answer about their artwork, and then we work on completing what I call a sandwich critique. In the sandwich critique, the students are to comment on another student's artwork with one thing that they did well and explaining it. One thing that they could improve on and how they could improve. And then lastly, another thing that they did very well. When the students do finish the final product, we can all see that student improved and how much they grew through their own reflection. The practices presented in this course affected how I viewed the way I teach. This course allowed me to reflect upon my past experiences and be able to identify how I was teaching and why I was using that strategy. Before this course, in analyzing each practice, I was teaching and figuring things out as I went without knowing why I was choosing to go about them that way. I feel much more confident now with being able to put a name description to what I was already practicing. That little bit of knowledge gives me the opportunity to research more and keep adjusting my practices to always find what works best for my students. Learning additional practices also opens the door to try new ways to educate my students more and more effectively. My experience as a teacher has definitely affected the way I think of good teaching. I've been exposed to so many different teaching practices, to so many different personalities of teachers, and to so many different environments that it has led me to believe that in order to be successful, the teacher needs to have two major qualities: flexibility and charisma. Without these qualities, there is no presence of a growth mindset or compassion to integrate students' learning. They need to be in a positive environment with a listening advocate who won't stop learning and improving themselves. In school, it is drilled into your head to make the best lesson plans, to have every scenario thought of, to have everything prepared. Well, I've got news for you. That does not always work out the way you think. And you have to be on your toes to make adjustments and sometimes even change the entire lesson around. It is good to have a plan, of course, but it's better to know that the plan might not always work. I foresee that more online education will be a barrier that could possibly make it difficult to include more of the best teaching practices into the classroom. This contains many variables that do not exist during the class sessions. Depending on the subject and the grade level, there is a great unknown of what is going on at home pertaining to any distractions for the student. This would make it very difficult to apply more collaborative activities or hands-on workshops for the students. Much self-determination and self-motivation would be necessary to be fully effective. There are many benefits to including best practices into everyday lessons. Data is constantly being collected, whether it is formal or informal assessment strategies. This allows the teacher to make adjustments as necessary throughout the whole lesson instead of just knowing what is better for the next time around. Students are engaging with one another and learning coherently to better obtain the information for long-term memory instead of short-term. All in all, students are constantly problem-solving. They are learning to think deeper and more conceptually, which forms an integrated education all around. I hope to teach for a school district that strives for excellence in education and constantly looking to find the best teaching strategies for the students. I hope to work for a school system that values art education and encourages their teachers to never stop working towards that growth mindset. I hope to teach more collaborative activities and have a more integrated units in my classroom. It is important for students to learn to equally participate with one another and to work towards a common goal. I think a better practice would be for students to work individually, but also be part of a greater project. This allows for more opportunities when students need parts modified or adapted. I want my classroom to be the room of new discoveries, and forming my classroom instruction off of an integrated unit will spark more student interest and ultimately allow more of an opportunity for student success.